So I would suggest that at this time, you all just agree to call the meeting to order at 4:04 and accept the agenda as presented. Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. So I was going to do a quick review of the charge of the Park and Recreation Commission for the benefit of a couple of new members. I think you guys have probably read a bit about the commission and what it does. There's a little bit of information online. The Park and Recreation Commission webpage is not overly detailed, as you probably have seen.
Excuse me, video and audio recorded.
So, thank you. In accordance with the provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting is being video and audio recorded. That's an announcement that we're required to make. And I believe the audio is not live. It'll be recorded and then played on the government channel. So, I notice here, Maureen, that the website needs to be a little bit updated with some of the members. Amy Baxter is still on here. She expired earlier in the year. And we need to get Tom on here and replace Jerry with. So that's just a website update.
Okay.
The commission makes park and recreation related policies and recommendations to the select board. That also needs to change. On various related projects, programs, activities, and initiatives at Jetty's Beach and Children's Beach specifically, but also certainly island-wide, the commission can make any number of recommendations regarding park and recreation activities, programs, suggestions. So one of the reasons you're convening today, the main reason is to review the Parks and Rec draft master plan, and Rob and our consultant here will get into that shortly. But one of the, and this has been out for quite a while, it was presented to the board last March, and there was a lot of stakeholder input previous to the report being put out. And now what needs to happen is, in my opinion, the commission should look through it, prioritize to the best of your ability the projects, and make those recommendations to the board so we can start working them into the town's capital improvement plan. And you all can decide if you would like additional public input above and beyond what has already been secured and solicited. So, since your current chair, or if Blair's been acting as the chair, isn't here, I would recommend that you all make a vote to elect officers. Typically it's chair and vice chair. Sometimes there's a secretary, and Blair, we think, has agreed to take minutes going forward. So maybe in keeping with tradition, the person who's not here is usually designated as the person to take the minutes.
That's fair enough.
It's standard. So would anybody want to make a motion for chair?
Make a motion for Tom Desmond?
I'll do it if you want me to, for sure, yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It sounds just pretty quick, so I felt like I just slipped into.
Is there any other nominations for
He's
chair?
he's been on to a couple of meetings and he can.
Any other nominations for chair? Not hearing any vote?
Aye.
All in favor for Tom to be chair and so vice chair?
Jack,
I'll take it, nobody else wants it. I couldn't take,
you're the first one to put me up. I mean, you're actually
I couldn't take chair because I just had a heart attack about a month ago. So I just get out of the hospital.
Oh, Jack.
So
Oh,
I
gosh.
didn't want to
You're
step
the
up.
epitome of a dedicated town volunteer. We should give you an award right now.
Had enough of them. To tell you something, I came home and read this report. I didn't realize this report had been out this long.
Yeah, it's
But
fine.
I came home and read this report. I thought I had died and gone to heaven.
So it looks like you have a chair and vice chair. Tom,
And Blair,
chair,
who-
Jack, vice, and we'll have
Thank you, everybody.
Blair,
Thank you.
Thank
do
you.
the
Thank you
minutes.
very much.
So with regard to your agenda item to review the draft of the master plan, Rob, do you want to give a little overview?
I just want to make sure Brian got that quote for the paper from Jack there. Yes. Thank you, Jack.
Good job. I never
He didn't really die and go to heaven.
Almost.
Oh, man.
Next thing you know, there's going to be a rumor.
Jack, you're killing me. All right, thank you so much. So, Rob McNeil, DPW Director. So when I first started in 2017, one of the things that the town manager shared with me, there was a real nugget that stuck out to me as soon as I visited Tom Nevers for the first time, was it's so great you have funding set aside for, to reconstruct the Tom Nevers playground. And so I was picturing, oh, this is neat, neat, and expecting some kind of, older style playground. And long story short, I realized really quickly that the parks and playgrounds particularly were in some really, really dire conditions. And some of the stuff had really been held together literally with duct tape for some time. So immediately made the case to go not spend the money on actual playground improvements, but to actually hit the pause button, back up, and assess all of the town's parks and recreation entities in a town-wide master plan. And so it was support of a previous makeup of this commission, the town manager, and quite a few others, that we went back to town meeting, reappropriated the money, and supplemented it with additional funding to actually get us to the point where we went and found Weston and Sampson and Mike Moonen and his team to take a look at this town-wide master planning effort. Mike reminded me just now, October 1st, 2018 was when we first kicked this effort off. And we ultimately have held numerous stakeholder meetings and started to refine what was necessary, what was needed, what the existing conditions were, what the current needs are, what the future needs are, and started to really boil this down and continue to seek feedback throughout the process. Mike will explain it in more detail, but suffice to say, there's been countless hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours put into this, both from town folks, from staff, from folks that schedule the fields. So we have lots of really good, hard data that support the recommendations that are here. These are conceptual construction numbers that are from a firm that does this for a living and are actively building facilities and improving facilities around the state and really in New England. But Mike can certainly speak a little bit more about that. I'm happy to jump in along the way and sort of provide a little bit more detail from my perspective, but I just want to introduce Mike Moonen from Weston and Sampson, who's been the team leader on this effort from the get-go and has really done the yeoman's work on this. So thank you, Mike.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. And thank you for your time on the commission tonight. And just really excited to be here and wrap up this project. As Rob said, it's been just a little over a year since we started. We really hit the ground running last October, to beat the winter weather, to get site assessments done and things like that. So tonight I'm going to I'll try to keep it a brief presentation, but it's pretty thorough, covering the project. We start to go over the process of the project, what we went through, the needs assessment, and then get into some of the proposed improvements that we have for each site.
I know there's quite a few slides to go through, and I think I heard Diane say you have to be out of here at 5.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, show of hands, Jack, you said you've read through it pretty thoroughly. I'm just curious, and no shame in admitting you haven't opened it, but has everyone had a chance to look at it and read this?
I've
Okay,
seen,
So
great.
what I might do is go through the first part quickly,
Yep.
because it's just a recap and it's to show you where we got where we are, and explain the needs and the whole needs assessment process, because that's important to understand, so that you can see where we got the information. And then I'll probably jump right into the phasing strategy that we're proposing, because that may be the most important thing to get your approval on and discuss. So, all right, so the project participants, it's pretty evident. It's the town, Weston Sampson, all the stakeholders, and the residents at large in the town and on the island. Our goals were to inventory all the properties, receive public input, establish the recreation facility needs, and then establish the strategic plan to upgrade and develop new recreation facilities, which is actually now folded into an actual document to work through. And the goals are to make the to generally improve the parks and recreation facilities and deliver safe, high-performing, gender equitable facilities, then establish and work through the phasing strategies and funding. And then a goal of the project was to at least do improvements to Tom Nevers Park as a result of the master plan. So these are the properties we looked at. So we took a look at all the project properties, assessed them, identified the deficiencies, and then came up with some improvement plans for different facilities. There were 3 passive parks, 4 active recreation properties, sports facilities, if you will, 2 neighborhood circles, and then the 5 beach properties. So we engaged on an aggressive public input and information gathering approach. At the beginning, starting last October, we did interviews and site visits right off the bat. Then we did additional site visits in November. That one was to mainly assess all the buildings. We had our architects out here looking at the buildings. Then we did some more interviews with stakeholders through November. We had the first public engagement meeting on November 15th. Gosh, just about a year ago. A year ago tomorrow. And then we had various phone conversations because that was the best way to chat with some of the sports activity people, and then some people that were off island, even in states further away. Then we had the public engagement meeting number 2, where we presented some initial thoughts and ideas on the sites. We conducted the public survey and gained input via an online survey. And then we had the 3rd engagement meeting where we took all the information from the first meeting, the reactions to the concept plans we put together. We adjusted, revised those, and then presented them at the 3rd engagement meeting. There wasn't too much adjustment needed from that, but we had, I put a public engagement meeting, but that was a select board meeting. I think on July 11th, where we presented our findings to the select board, and then them to ask questions and provide input. So they had some really good input, so we made adjustments to that. And then we had a meeting with the Tom Nevers Association, mainly focusing on Tom Nevers Park on August 3rd. And then from then we proceeded to put together the draft master plan document, had some more internal meetings, and developed the phasing strategies, and that's where we are today. Part of the process was to develop a user matrix where we list all the facilities, mainly dealing with playing fields, athletic fields, because that's where the turf improvements and the use is most prevalent, because the amount of use of the fields can reflect how, can relate to the poor conditions, but it also can let you know if those fields are overused and see if there's a need for additional fields to take the play off those fields so they can be improved. So we listed all those, and as you can see, actually, I was going to point out that my pointer's not working. The grass playing fields at Belvedere are overused. They're used about 900 hours a year. The recommended use for healthy turf is about 600. So they're used about 1.5 times the amount that they should be. And this also doesn't even account for people that are requesting the use of the fields, but get denied because they're already booked. Then again, at Delta Fields, you'll see the fields at Delta are used at about 500 or so hours. So their use is about okay, about average. And then we also gathered the use on the tennis courts at Jetty's Beach, which showed quite significant hours on there due to the summer programs out there. So then other general observations and then information gathered from the input is that overall, again, I'm not going to read them all, but improve accessibility. Almost all the sites lack ADA compliance. Then renovate or upgrade all the support buildings. There's a request to have drinking fountains, bike racks, benches at each site. And then there was a great input to have new playgrounds and then to incorporate natural play in the playgrounds. Address conflicts between users and abutters, and then wayfinding. One thing we found is that a lot of people commented that some of the parks are hard to find because there isn't signage identifying how to get there, or even when you get there, there isn't signage stating that it's a town park. And then some other ones, people desired, and we noticed that turf conditions at most of the fields needed to be improved. We're actually in the improvements. They want, there's a desire to have resiliency and sustainability folded into the projects. Another thing to look at is that parks, DPW, and town staff in general, they need housing for seasonal staff. So that could be considered when renovating buildings. And then there was a lot of input on considering the construction of an indoor athletic complex, either for a field or just tennis. One of the biggest desires was to have a place to just walk and do laps in an indoor facility in the winter, because there really isn't a place on the island to do that in the winter season. The online survey results, 94% described the parks as adequate or needs improvement, and 49%, so almost 50% of the people said that the parks in general need improvement. 42 to 48 of respondents rate Tom Nevers, Children's, Fisherman's Beach as fair or poor. And then, again, additional indoor facilities. Just on the online survey, 48% of the people desired an indoor facility. The requested activities, playgrounds, was the highest at 47%, then mountain bike and hiking trails, tennis courts, basketball courts, more lacrosse soccer space, shade shelters to be added to the facilities, and then gym and fitness equipment at parks. And that was also discussed in relation to circular route paths or walking paths at the parks. So we did we did concept designs at 5 sites, I believe, and then and these were kind of vetted and fleshed out during the public input process. The first one we did was Tom Nevers Park. I'm not going to go over the existing conditions because I'm sure everybody's familiar with the deficiencies there and the condition of the site. I skipped through. I'm sorry. I'll go to Nobadir then. Nobadir Athletic Complex. This is an air photo of the existing site. So the proposed master plan it's basically to continue the implementation on the overall master plan of the park that's already permitted. The part of the site that's built out already is this and this. So the proposal is to add a new athletic field, be it synthetic turf or natural turf, along with the parking for that field. And then there's the field house addition, which is actually already in process. And that's already approved to go forward, actually. So then Delta Fields. One thing is with Delta Fields, so this is part of the program, is that once we construct the new field at Nobadir, the programming from these rectangular fields at Delta Fields can be switched over to Nobadir, and then you'll see further on eventually to Tom Nevers also. And that would allow for Delta Field to be reconstructed as a Little League and a softball complex. And so it'd be the addition of 2 softball fields here. And you'll see on the future Tom Nevers plan that the Tom Nevers softball fields would be removed, and these would be replaced here at Delta Fields.
Can we interject?
Yep, yeah, oh yeah,
Ask
definitely.
questions at any
Yep,
time?
yep.
Okay. Rob and I have recently spoken about this. This property needs a little work in terms of ownership review, because the airport actually is under their control.
Right, we
And-
leased that from the airport.
Right. And there may be some FAA issues with further development here, and that hasn't been resolved yet.
Okay, so then the rest of the improvements is to have a shade shelter gathering facility in the middle of the fields. And then this actually is the existing support building, so that would be renovated, kept in the same location. And then the addition of a playground, children's playground, and expansion of the parking lot. Right now, the parking lot is only this half, and this would add.
The parking lot, we don't have permission for the size of that parking lot either. All we have is
That's
a
right.
roadway going in. And the parking lot is something we just did.
Okay.
Without permission.
Without permission, so that has to get resolved also.
Well, sort of.
So, and then throughout the site, walking loop paths up here around the fields, and then also down through this natural area. And then connections, additional connections over to the bike path, and then over to Nobadir Fields, or part of the project. So then now I have Tom Nevers. I'm sorry I mixed up the order, but so this is an existing air photo of Tom Nevers, and actually a couple reasons. Sorry, these softball fields. One of the it's difficult to play softball here when the fog rolls in, because the pop flies come up and then they can't see them and they have to stop playing. So that's one reason to move the softball over to Delta.
Sorry, can I follow up? Did people say that
Yes,
in the surveys and stuff? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would a little bit think, wouldn't that be anywhere?
it would be anywhere, but it's more so at Tom Nevers. I guess they said that it doesn't happen as much at the Little League fields at Delta.
Okay.
So,
Is there softball happening here, like a league or anything? Like
there
Little
is,
League?
and then they occasionally have tournaments here, or I can't remember if it's.
Do you have the
like to have tournaments
usage
here.
stats for Tom Nevers?
I don't, because they didn't have a lot of programmed use of it.
Yeah.
Just because it's
Yeah.
fallen in such disrepair, it's used more.
Because that would be
for
the
just
only thing, would be
pickup.
softball probably.
That is, and they also play soccer in the outfield, at the
Right.
larger field, but it's just not documented.
That's
So
correct.
the town
It gets a lot of, it gets a lot of arbitrary use.
Yeah, it's just-
So just like
people
It's just
recreational
recreational
pickup.
pickup.
There's a lot of use on weekends.
Yeah, it's a lot
Adult
of
use, yeah.
organized.
But not like registering with the town and saying.
It's
That's right.
this past year, and I know Blair's not here, but this past year, there's been a big effort to get these folks organized into a league situation, or at least on the town's radar for usage. So I think the big point for softball was more about making sure that there was 2 fields for tournament play, to be able to replicate that, and then at the same time to be able to recognize that as these things move forward, providing the adequate level capacity that's matched up with the needs identified allows for a far better programming and appropriate staying under the maximum recommended usage for the fields. Sometimes, and something was said at our initial presentation summary of the results of the field usage, that talked about some minor complaints that we get about maintaining the fields in a real excellent state are not able to be achieved because they're so overused. So you can't get the kind of growth needed to really keep the field looking its best if it doesn't have any rest period.
Tom Neves, these people go out there on weekends and they maintain a lot of that stuff themselves, they do. You
Yeah.
see them out there with rakes and
They
shovels
groom it.
every weekend before they start playing. I usually stop by and see them just to talk to them, trying to get them to cut the music down and stuff like that. But you get about 40 or 50 cars out there on a good weekend.
Mhm.
You get a lot of people use it.
That's right. That's
It's a
right.
great spot.
And that's another part of it too, the desire out at Tom Nevers to not have tournament play. So the softball wants tournament play, so moving softball over to Delta achieves that goal also. So the preferred plan, as it has developed, is basically, I'll start with the fields, I guess, because that's what we discussed. So it's two rectangular play fields that can be used in a variety of ways, multi-use. And then those would be developed as athletic fields. But then this area over here would be just an extra open grass space that can be used as part of the fairground or future athletic fields if the usage demands it down the road. And then moving over here, 2 tennis courts, 2 basketball courts, the new parking facility where half of it this would be used most of the time, and then this end would be used for basketball. But if there's a larger event at the park or more parking is needed, the parking would be opened up and you could park on the basketball court area.
Where's this at Nova Fields?
No, this is Tom Nevers.
Tom Neves.
Tom Nevers. And this is about where the existing street hockey rink is.
Right, that's it now, yeah.
And then a new children's playground to orient you also. This is the existing park support building, so that would be renovated as part of the project. And then the new playground would be put in just about the same location that it is now. This is an open field area that would be undulating lawn to be used for open recreation and then also for the fairgrounds. The bunker, this is the JFK bunker, it's proposed to stay in place. There's talk about potentially turning it into a museum, but that's...
Has it always been called the JFK bunker?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And how'd they get that name? I'm just
John
curious.
F. Kennedy.
Yeah, no, I understand
There's a
that,
bunker
but
for
what's
John
his
F. Kennedy
relationship
when
to
he
that
was-
bunker? What's his,
He lived in Hyannis, it's supposed to have been a hideout for him.
okay.
But that was the story, I don't know if it's
Yeah,
a rumor or
I
not.
guess he was on island quite often when he was president, so they built the bunker for him in case there was an event. It was during the Cold War, so.
Okay.
Over in the Bay of Pigs and
Right.
doing that.
But word is he never visited there.
Okay.
There's also one down in Florida that actually is a museum right now, but he did visit that one, I heard.
Well, the only
So-
reason I mention it, and if I'm getting ahead of myself, just cut me off, but I live out there. I live on Van
Oh,
Fleet. So I spent a lot of time on this site. I actually like it because there's no one out there and I get to enjoy the peace and
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah.
But this plan is wonderful. But I always looked at that bunker as saying, now that's a natural maintenance shed or storage
I
facility.
think they use it for storage now. The
Right.
town does. Yeah.
And no disrespect to the president, but, as a practical matter, I see it as a wonderful resource to store tools, equipment,
Yeah.
and it kind of ties into your undulating field because that itself is undulating.
Yes.
And what I do like to do when I walk my dog out there is stand on the top of it. If you've ever seen it, you get a panoramic view. So my other concern, and again, if I'm getting ahead of myself, just say so, is that, and no disrespect to the president, if you turn it into a museum, my suspicion is that every tourist that steps on the island is gonna wanna go out there and look at it. So just keep that in mind. When,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Yeah,
Only because his name's associated with it.
Yeah.
So you're not talking about, in my opinion, 20 visitors a week. You're talking hundreds a week. Because, as you all know, there are the tourist bus on Nantucket, which is great, it's good for commerce, it's a wonderful thing. But anyone who steps off that ferry, they're gonna wanna see that bunker. So just keep that in mind and how that will impact the usage out there. You could end up getting 100 people out there a day. I don't know
That
what-
could be a positive if they're, I don't know if towns can charge for entry, but
It could be a positive, but I just think you have to look at it. It could be a positive or it could be a negative, because with this investment that you're making, with the sports, you're gonna obviously get people out there, but there's gonna be an incremental increase in traffic out there.
If you had a bike path down there, it'd be nice for
Yeah.
people biking. But you're not gonna get tour buses down there, because they don't wanna make that tour any longer than it is.
well, I think that a bike path is in the pipeline, so I'd assume that
Oh,
road
yes.
would be fixed up in the future.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, okay, yeah.
I don't know if Mike's gonna cover it, but I think,
The middle one.
I just wanna make it known that there's something big that's gonna have to happen before
So,
summer.
Yeah.
so we have the field and we have the path area.
Just a quick point here. The original design, or the existing design, has all the active usage basically to the north. This respects that and continues to have sort of an active, passive split, where this field here is intended to be regraded, yes, but basically something that's got to be a wide open space to be used generally for the fair. And other than that, just a large open park area, walking paths and such.
What's there right now with that area?
This is just grass. There's a dirt bike track over here.
Okay,
But,
okay, now I know.
And there's like a strip of
And there's a
pavement,
park.
There's some old parking
Yeah.
stuff and it's
naval base.
circulation stuff, and the guard shack sort of over here.
Let's keep the guard check.
So this would be something, you'd have like a turnaround for hopefully near the bus route at some point, a shade shelter to receive people, and then start to fluctuate or utilize the site. The one thing that's sort of the constant here is we definitely expect some retreat and continued erosion along the beach. So having this entire southern section as passive recreation, it's limited investment into this section here. So most of the infrastructure is going to exist up in here. There's right now, if you've been out here, there's a debris field that's opened up in this far corner, and we've identified basically a large debris field that extends through basically this whole area here. That's basically buried foundation material that was demolished, that was part of the old Navy base, that is now being investigated, basically a first-tier environmental investigation to find out what's there. Often materials of that vintage have some level of hazardous materials associated with that, whether it's coatings or just materials that were used back in the 40s and 50s for construction. So Weston & Simpson has a part of their contract that's been to sample and test this material. It was just done.
When they tore down those buildings out there, they buried in that.
They buried it, yeah. So the point is, we don't want to spend millions, restoring and reconstructing this entire site without getting to the bottom of
Right.
this debris field and recognizing what it is and mitigating it if necessary. So we're getting to that now. So the short story is Tom Nevers has been slated to be the first park to be reconstructed. However, to get us to that point, it's recognized that we need to really truly understand the limitations or concerns here first. Number two, in order for us to just replace this space that's 2 softball fields with these fields. We need to replicate softball somewhere before this.
Right.
In order for us to do softball at Delta, we need to replace the square fields at Delta at Nobodere. So if we work backwards, ultimately the idea would be to do some improvements at Nobodere, then move over to Delta, and then by that time, hopefully this area is identified and mitigated. And in the very interim, we've talked about once a final location for the playground is designed, that we take that particular portion out of order and build the playground. So the rest of it can come, but the playground will be done first, and could be there for a year or 2 before the rest of the facility gets built out.
You got some new stuff up there already, haven't
We
you?
have confidence that.
Yeah, isn't
that it
there a new
goes-
playground?
There's
There's
some
some
new
new
elements, but
equipment.
they're considered to be temporary.
Oh, okay,
Some new elements because we took out stuff that was unsafe
right, yeah.
there and at Jetties.
You know what I'll do, to feed off of that momentum you had with that development, I'll skip over some of the other sites and
Sure.
get to that program, then I'll go back to the other sites.
I definitely want to provide some time for questions, so.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the remainder of the site, it's pretty clear. I mean, walking paths, fairgrounds, buffer, dunes, increasing the buffer dunes. And then these are shade shelters, beach access, and this is a maintenance access to the beach. And then there's he mentioned a drop-off area or a future bus route with access to the beach on this side. So then I'm going to skip over these other sites to just go to that phasing that Rob talked about. So in order to make kind of the whole big picture work, the phase, we're calling this phase 1, so it's phase 1 of the master plan work, would be to construct the new athletic field at Nobodere with the parking. That would allow the programming from Delta to be moved over to here, and then replace the, take out the rectangular fields at Delta and build the new complex with the 2 new softball fields. Once those are completed, then we would be able to come in and construct at Tom Nevers, and then eventually, actually in the future, build these fields. But this is the proposed phase 1 for right now. The top 3 priorities at Tom Nevers was the new playground. With that comes better, safer parking, and then also the third most desired thing was the beach access. Because if you've ever been out there and you know Tom, you have to walk down this steep slope to get to
Well,
the beach. So
To Rob's
it'd be
point,
safer
the
beach
erosion out
access.
there.
That's right.
Every time I come down to relax down here, I go right out to that beach, and that erosion is really
It's
picking up.
incredible. Yeah.
It's, so the buffer, having that field as a buffer is very smart.
Yeah, that
You need-
erosion
you-
there, that's the old sewer beds.
Yeah, and
For the base.
when Marcy and I first came down here, I went to a meeting at the VFW building down there. Remember the VFW building?
Oh, yeah.
We had a town meeting there, and it's more than gone.
Right.
There was a meeting down at Tom Nevers Association meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
they used to use that building for neighborhood meetings.
Yes, and we went there, and obviously it's not there anymore. So, and there still may be ordinance down there too. You don't know, right? Particularly in that one area where you said off to the left, there might be.
Well, the federal government has done I guess I would call it a pretty extensive process to identify any unexploded ordnance. I mean, they had a multi-year program for that. Every now and then, something surfaces.
Yeah,
So,
they did have frogmen out there for one whole summer doing a thorough job. I remember seeing them, and they found stuff actually.
yeah, they did.
Okay. So that's the proposal to be for the first implementation of the master plan, and then in the future, after the other facilities are up and running, this may be looked at as a next phase to construct those fields and the tennis courts and the basketball courts.
So Mike, we got everyone excited about all this.
Yeah.
Do we have the costs up?
I didn't put the costs in the presentation,
Okay.
but they're in the master plan. And I think this phase, I'm just going
Do we
through
walk
memory,
through,
but I think
walk
this
through
is-
from from nobody
Nobody
to
here?
Delta to here?
Okay, this one is roughly $3 million.
For what? For what?
For the addition of the athletic field and the parking lot
Are we talking grass or synthetic?
for synthetic.
Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry, I think, oh my gosh.
Grass would be cheaper. But
I think it was
maintenance.
2.9 million to 3.9 million
Yeah.
in that range.
Yeah.
I think what we said. Okay, thanks.
Can I interject for 1 second?
For,
Thanks.
So, I just, for the benefit of my fellow board members, typically in my work, I do a lot of this sort of thing, and just to be cautious, I always go with the higher number, right? Don't go with the lower number. In the report that they put together, I think you have tables showing high and low, is that correct?
That's right.
Assume the higher one.
Especially because it's down here.
Is there a specific Parks and Recreation budget, or is it just you ask for what you need?
That's right.
There's no specific budget allocated to Park and Rec, no. There's no specific budget allocated to any department.
Okay.
What needs to happen is the projects need to be integrated into the capital improvement plan, which covers all projects for the town, and then they will need to be prioritized in some manner.
Okay.
Could I add one other point? And if I'm talking too much, just tell me to be quiet.
No, it's-
So I read this report cover to cover. It's not an extravagant proposal, not by any stretch. And in my work, I have occasion to travel a lot. And this is, and I typically go visit the parks because I like parks, I have nothing else to do, so I go visit them. And this is straight down the middle. This is not unusual. The infrastructure build here is not, as I said, extravagant. The reason I mentioned it, I saw a comment somewhere in your work or maybe online or something, that somebody said, why are we spending so much money on parks? And, well, we don't have time to discuss that because there's all sorts of good reasons to spend the money. But this is not an extravagant proposal. This is straight down the middle stuff. You're asking for fields, basketball courts, tennis courts, some walking paths, and you can nickel and dime it if you want, but in the end, you're probably not going to save that much money. And I think you'll find over time that a good park system solves more problems than you can imagine. And so-
To add to that, Tom, I think the big thing to recognize here is, for the most part, we're not really adding a tremendous amount of new. This is really reconstructing stuff that was built from the 50s on.
Right.
And for the most part, the town has done its best to try to keep up with the demands of an increasing population, a changing dynamic of the use of the fields and the sports in general. If you had told me 30, 40 years ago that baseball would be eclipsed by lacrosse, I would have asked you what lacrosse was, right? And so we're seeing that. That's a reality of today.
Right.
So addressing those set of concerns is really important for us.
We're needing coming back.
Right, so the other point I want to make is, and you addressed it in your report as well, which is very good, and is the ongoing maintenance, and I think you alluded to it as in the beginning, and supervision of programming. So maintenance is what I would be interested to find out at some point, is there a general rule of thumb of what the maintenance cost would be in relation to the capital spend? So in other words, is it 10%? In other words, if I spend $1 million on a project, do I assume it's going to cost $10,000, $100,000, somewhere in between to maintain that?
Yeah.
A year? What-
So, and those are great things, and I'll have Mike address that. One thing I can simply say is the town, when they constructed their first and only synthetic turf field, they bought extra equipment with it. Part of the contract included the crumb rubber material that's supposed to be implemented into the field. We really can't find much evidence of any ongoing regular maintenance that has occurred on that field until just now. So we've committed to, getting in there and using the materials that were provided back when the field was constructed. We just had a non-island contractor come out a week or two ago to do, this is following up on testing of the field they did a month or two ago to confirm the specific areas around the field that needed attention. They came in and provided that service, something that we're hoping to get into doing twice a year, which is recommended, to try to keep the life of the field up. But that synthetic surface needs to be replaced periodically, somewhere between 10 and 15 years, depending on how often you maintain it. And those are the numbers that we play with,
Right.
is how often do we expect to be able to have this in service, and how often do we replace it. We play those games with the Capital Improvement Committee to make sure that they're forecasting these costs along with all the other asks. So,
When was that? So I'm sorry, I thought you.
no, that's right.
I'm trying to remember when that was done, when the synthetic flanker was put.
I think it was 2009.
2009.
I think so, I'm not positive.
So, okay,
Yeah, it's been there almost 10 years.
almost
Okay.
10 years. Sorry, I think I interrupted you, I'm sorry. 2009.
But it's just part of an overall program. When I'm talking about this, it's really recognizing not just the capital investment, but it's the long-term operation and maintenance, and ultimately keeping these as, to the highest expectation that the town and its users are demanding.
Right, because we're gonna have to find the money for that, right?
Yep.
Because ultimately we'll be asked about it, justifiably so.
So would asking for the money or putting the proposal happen in different stages? Like would we just ask for the nobody or money first and then do the different phases?
Sure. So the idea is that these are concepts. The next step would be to go to a full design for each one of these locations. The first step is getting some endorsement here, getting questions vetted, and making sure that this is the program, putting some recommendations forth to the select board to consider, and ultimately moving forward with whatever the select board is in support of. We'd come back at that point and would ask to move forward with design for whatever program is approved. And then going through the design phase, it's a far more detailed approach, and putting together plans and specifications for a contractor ultimately to be able to bid on, and then move forward with construction. And then we'll start to take a look at things like phasing to balance the costs out over a number of years, or possibly taking advantage of potentially a downturn in the economy where you might find a hungrier group of contractors and maybe try to push out more in some of those slow times to get better pricing, take advantage of that. So there's a lot more to it once we decide on what we want to do.
Okay. So to finish up the costs, this is Delta Field's 7.5 to 9.5 million, kind of rounding it. And then this program, this was the one that was $4 million, so $4.1 to $5.1 million for
Just for phase one of
this phase one at Tom Evers.
What about the whole thing?
Mike, where are the large, just to jump in, where are the large costs associated with this phase?
There's a lot of cost in earthwork. We allowed for, and then actually the earthwork of this area and resculpting, and the pathways, the access to the beach. The parking lot is pretty costly because just on the island the asphalt costs are pretty high.
Was there an assumption for the removal of the buried debris?
There wasn't an assumption for the removal of that, because that would be estimated as part of that assessment project. But that cost, anticipating that may be able to be reburied, then there wouldn't be much extra cost for that, for that debris. If that has to be removed, it would.
It's an
add
unknown until we have it
yeah.
classified.
It is, yeah. So then, there's a kind of a budget allowed for the playground, but that can be flexible. Again, that's why there's a varying in the cost.
What was the budget for that?
Was it? Do I have?
I'm just throwing it against, I think
No, I know.
the new land bank, Old South Road playground was somewhere in the 1.2, 1.4 range, if I remember correctly. Is that,
I don't know.
I think it's right in there.
Wait, is it,
Yeah, I didn't have it just in this chart, I don't have the playground separated out.
so buildings and structures are between 900 and 1,100.
That's right. And it's all.
And that includes
A lot of that
renovating the
includes
bathroom.
renovating the existing bathroom
Yeah.
and then the shade shelters
Okay.
on the site. Again, it's flexible depending on how much you detail those or how fancy you want to get with the structures and so forth.
Can I just ask you again, did you say, so nobody at 3 million, Delta 7.2 to 9.5 million?
That's right.
And then Tom Nevis for first phase is 5 million,
Yep.
the top.
Yeah, about 4 million to 5 million.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, do they need to vote to endorse or not before Diana leaves, or is it?
I've changed it to 5:15.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, I was
You
kind of
guys-
watching the time a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think you need to be comfortable when you're ready, when you think you're ready to recommend something to the board. And if that's today, that's great. Just need to know what like, specifically you want to recommend. And then Rob and I's thinking a little bit was that perhaps at a board meeting, a select board meeting, maybe even if, depending on how ready you are, on December 4th, 3 weeks from now, we would have an agenda item that says something like Park and Rec recommendations regarding Park and Rec master plan, something like that. And then if you guys could be there, that would be great, through your chair maybe, to explain the recommendations and say sort of what your priorities are. Do you agree with the priorities that have been put forward here? I think we'd probably, so I guess one idea would be, is there anything we want to get into the fiscal 21 program, which do we have anything in there now?
The nobody air piece is placeholder, and it's
Okay.
actually moved to 22.
Okay, so we didn't get this off the ground as quickly as perhaps we could have early on. So we've kind of missed the 21 review process. Capital Program Committee is well into
Right.
21. So there's not a big rush then, but I think we'd like to start getting, public awareness of this and
Engineering.
and engineering underway, but for the priority that we want to look at. So if you agree that it's nobody there, with perhaps some interim measures at Tom Nevers. And I say that because there was a lot of public interest in Tom Nevers 2 years ago, or
Right.
about 2 years ago when we first started talking about this. And I think those interim measures are going to be kind of important to get a little underway with the concurrent things also happening at Tom Nevers, like this debris field problem.
Right.
So your question was, I'm sorry, what was it again?
About asking for the money if you go by phases or if you, would do it in one chunk, but I think it would be one chunk to say, like, this is what.
You would phase it, and like one phase would be probably the one chunk, like nobody there would be
Yeah.
a
Nobody
big,
was
one
first
big
one, right.
project,
Do you ask me for 3 million?
or whatever.
I think the idea would be to support a plan,
Yeah,
which may be, yes, we as presented, the preferred alternative is to move forward with Tom Nevers, right? In order to do that, you have to do the Delta and the nobody air pieces. So it would stand to reason that following nobody air first, Delta second, and then Tom Nevers, which again gives us time to work on some of the unknowns at Tom Nevers,
But you phrase it as like one big plan.
One project that's phased in
Yeah.
three ways.
So to your point, and I just did a quick addition, and check my arithmetic when you get a chance, but phase one for the 3 sites comes up to 18.8 million. So assume 20. Okay? And it sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but it's not extravagant. Because you have to think about it, it's a long-term investment. It has to be done. I don't think we really have much of a choice as a community. So, and I'm not throwing money around here, but, $20 million, it's about $7 million a site, right? $6.5 million a site. And construction on Nantucket's typically much more expensive than anywhere else. What are we, at least 25% higher?
2 or 3 years down the road, when you bid this out, prices are gonna be high.
Right,
Yep.
so,
Yeah, we escalated that already.
right, so
So,
for purposes of this discussion tonight, I think we should work with 20 million for this phase one, and then assume it's gonna be higher,
mhm.
because inflation does have an effect.
And then the other projects in the master plan, you obviously looked at some of the other parks with the town of Nantucket. So, but we could just present like these 3 properties to the select board first.
Right.
Is that true, or
Yeah.
are we saying like this is the whole master plan?
Well, I think that it's a little up to how you want to present it to the board, but typically with a master plan like this, you wouldn't do everything at once.
Yeah.
You would phase it. So you might, and what the consultant and Rob are saying is that with respect to the fields part of the master plan, there's a kind of an order
Yeah.
that would be best followed. But there's a lot of other things in here too, and some of them you might say, dog park. Well, looks like there's a dog park underway right now. Maybe that goes more to the back burner and we look at that at a later time.
Okay.
More playgrounds. Again, we have a beautiful brand new one now on Old South Road. There's more areas in here, but perhaps we focus on the areas that have playgrounds already and make them better. And then we work on areas that need more playgrounds. I forget what some of the other stuff is in here, but things like the littler
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that.
But so if we were gonna present something to the board for 2021, you said? No,
It would be-
22.
Yeah,
We could say we just wanna focus on Nobodier, Delta, and Tom Nevers as 3 separate phases.
Yeah,
And
and-
playing fields.
and they might not all be able to be funded in 2020.
Yeah.
Because,
But we don't have to be like, oh, we also, in the master plan is all this other stuff.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, you can over time sort of evaluate all of those things as to how important are they? Maybe we get some more public input on some of them. And they may be of lesser expense, so maybe we recommend some of those in 22, 23, or 24. And I always caution groups of this, and this is something that probably Jack well knows. The projects in this Park and Rec master plan are some of many projects townwide. Sewer, solid waste, roads, bike paths, facilities. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of capital projects over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'd like to characterize the master plan effort that has been completed here in 2019 as a good 10-year look ahead, right? So how much of that gets done in the next 5 to 10 is really based on input from, decision makers like you folks and the select board, and then the voters, right? And so they'll be able to gauge and will tell you very clearly with their votes what they'll allow, what they'll support. And so you may get 5 years down the road and see that you've been able to build out these 3 first phases. And you have fantastic resources now, and the programming is loosened up and things are really going well. So that's a great time to say, let's revisit this master plan that was done 5 years ago and see what else needs to get done. Or hey, it's very different now, 2024, 2025. There's a whole new sport craze that's out there that is underutilized or is not addressed at all, or just, you never know. Or, hey, we've never got to those 3 phases because, something else came up and has sort of blocked our ability to fund it. But, okay, now's the time. And so it's just a great place to look back to and guide the future as well.
And to you made a good point earlier, Rob. And just from what I do in my work, and I crunch numbers a lot. But we're not building anything new here. We're rehabilitating existing facilities. So this is almost a repairs and maintenance project, as opposed to a new capital plan per se, although it's a capital plan, but we're not building a brand new facility. We're rehabilitating that which we already have. Is that fair for me to assume that?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Existing facilities.
So the reason I mention it is that in my mind, something like this would have to get done. It's not going to go away. This is a problem. We're solving a problem. We're not really doing something new. We're solving a problem. So if we don't do it now in some fashion, and it has to be integrated, because if it's not, it's going to cost more money in the end, a lot more money. So whatever document that we approve as a commission, we have to insist that it be adhered to the extent that we can, because it's going to cost more money if we do it in stages that aren't part of the plan. And it will cost more money if we don't do it as part of a plan. And we live on an island where things are more expensive, whether it's a quart of milk or a 2x4, right?
That's right.
So the commission knows that. And it's not like we're asking them to write an $18 million check out of the gate. It's going to be obviously progress billing, et cetera, as we move forward.
More importantly, we've got to clean up Belvedere. Tom Nevers.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing that, ever since I've been on Park and Rec, is Tom Nevers.
Well, it is getting more use since Marcy and I have lived out
And I
there for
kinda
almost
think we're
20
getting
years now,
almost
and it's
away
really
from that.
changed out there. It is getting more use, and the people that are using it, I've noticed, are young families with little children, with 3 and 4-year-old kids. It's a great place to take the kids out there and let them run around, right? It's like turning them loose.
I love this plan and everything, and I was at
Yeah.
the select board meeting,
Oh, yeah.
but I'm still not convinced that we're taking care of the problem right there at Tom Nevers. So that's all, I just want to throw that out there. And I have one more question for Libby. So the town owns the Delta Fields, or is that still part of the airport? I mean, Belvedere.
The land bank technically.
Land bank's that,
Yeah.
and Delta, I don't know if Tom knows, but Delta, do we have like a long contract with the airport? Because that actually came up at a airport commissioners meeting not long ago.
Yeah, there's some, how can I put this? Some discussion about how valid our agreement with them is or is not. And we need to definitely resolve it, and there's an issue about potentially whether or not there's a payment due and how much that might be. So we have some things that we need to work out.
It used to be $10,000 a year that we're supposed to pay, but it's only if we made money. We don't make any money there.
No, yeah. Well, I missed the meeting,
They're
so.
selling food there, but that money goes to the Little League.
Yeah.
And they
Make any money
picked us
off
up
that
on that
either.
once. And so we really don't charge a fee or anything there, so.
Well, my kids went there, and now my grandchildren are there, so,
Right.
and I'm still out there flipping those flipping hamburgers. And I'm telling you, there's no money to be
Once you
made.
volunteer.
But I will say that that's the foggiest spot on the island. I don't agree that Tom Nevers,
Oh,
the
yeah.
airport and the Delta is the foggiest. If you've ever stayed out there at
And
8
Delta
o'clock at
is
night.
the coldest.
Yes.
then cold, get that far field.
Yeah.
We need a warming shelter.
I have a couple
But-
questions about the Belvedere. So the building that
The field house.
the field house. Thank you.
It's
That's
actually
something that's already in the pipeline.
It is.
And is it in that location?
No.
No, it's actually proposed over here.
Yes.
We actually put it in one spot on this plan.
But that's gonna be going ahead already.
That's moving forward, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So even if that goes in, the other stuff can work around it. You
definitely.
wouldn't have to.
Yep.
And in terms of what kind of field it would be, whether it would be natural turf or the synthetic, did you get anything from the interviews?
They prefer
About-
synthetic turf field.
Okay.
Because actually what happens now is when the grass fields can't be played on in early fall.
Or
I mean,
spring.
in late fall, early spring, and or after really wet conditions, everybody wants to use the synthetic
Yeah.
turf field. Or they move the most important, or strategically, they move the most important game to the synthetic turf field and everybody else gets canceled. And they usually do it if there's an off-island team on island that's scheduled to play there, possibly on grass. And if there's bad weather, they move them onto the synthetic turf field.
So one thing that's
Like a game to move them around.
one thing that's important to realize is obviously here the difference in surface dictates the intensity of the use, right? So Mike shared earlier how intense these fields are used, and for the square footage, because we have limited space to develop these projects on, building a synthetic turf field, even though it is about a third more expected cost up front, we're able to use that field and program it at a much higher intensity than we can for a natural turf.
Well, I think it makes sense to go ahead with this plan for Novadear because the data's there that the fields are overused. So if you have another one, it'll distribute that more. And even if it takes longer to get to the other stuff, it's still progressing towards Tom Nevers, even though it's not actually.
Well, the only, the purpose of my comment was more of a financial comment, because I'm assuming that when you did this study and ran your costs, it took into account that you'd have to use Novadear if you're fixing Tom Nevers, et cetera. So in other words, the programs have got to be accommodated? Is that fair for me
That's
to
right.
make that assumption?
Yes.
And that's built into the numbers that you're putting out, the costs, et cetera? Or can we do them separately?
No, they could be done separately.
Okay, so,
As long as, like, in order to not disrupt programs in play, that's the order that's recommended.
so you have a precise order that is already recommended and Novadear is first?
That's right.
Okay, so, and that appears to be the spot for the greatest use of the community, correct?
Yes.
So that would make sense, I agree.
So while Novadear is under construction, where do those,
That's a wooded area right now.
So
that's
those
the
three
benefit.
fields that are there would still be able to be.
so the center one is where the turf field is?
That's
now,
right, that's
In a
correct.
sense,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple things? So back to Tom Nevers then, and the order of the stuff. So I'm trying to advocate at some point for there to be something happening at Tom Nevers, if not full-on fields and full-on redo in the interim, because it's gonna be a couple years before this, maybe more, like 4, before this all can get underway. So whatever we can do at Tom Nevers to make things a little better in the interim, even if it's temporary, more temporary, that would be, I think that would be good.
There was a
Yeah.
recommendation to, once the playground is designed, is to install the permanent playground in its permanent location at Tom Nevers
Okay,
ahead of the rest of the construction.
okay,
And that can be done outside of any of the field reconfiguration. Actually, this phase could be done outside of any of the field reconfiguration.
okay.
Because the existing softball field fits right here. And this could be constructed while both these softball fields stay in.
Where's the new playground going?
An extension of the
Right.
existing.
It's
Where the
expanded
same
from where
Okay,
the
right.
existing one is.
Where it is, okay.
That building is
You know where those street hockey things are?
Yeah,
Out here?
right, it's right over here.
Okay, so would that be interrupted?
That could remain, and the playground could be constructed.
Temporarily,
Yeah.
at least initially.
And
But
then
then
you'd
would
still
they be
use the
fixed up?
parking.
In the end, it would be demolished and replaced with a parking lot.
Okay, So we might want to, so this is something we might want to think about, because I have recent information that kids are actively using the street hockey outlet.
Yeah, a lot of people
That's
are,
what-
yeah.
So it might be something to just think about, and maybe we bring some people in and see. It seems like it's been a bit hot and cold. There's like, kids sort of like discover it and then rediscover it, and then don't use it for a while, and then it kind of comes back in. But I think they're using it now.
Yeah.
So it just might be, it's just something to think about. Sorry.
So yeah, I'm just gonna show, we didn't put this graphic on the screen, but this,
Oh, okay.
in the
Oh.
master plan report, it shows phase one overlaid on the existing
Okay,
site. So,
okay.
so the softball fields
They could still.
could stay in
keep being
place.
used. Okay.
And then this could be remediated and then.
All right, also, you probably have already addressed this at other areas, but the synthetic field and what it is made of,
Mhm.
4, 5, 7 years ago, something like this, there was a big outcry
There's a
about
big upgrade.
foam,
Yeah,
rubber
in
and stuff.
2016-ish. or
Yeah,
2015.
And towns were stopping
Yeah.
building them because,
Yeah.
because of it. Has that
Well,
changed?
No, shortly after that big uproar, the state of Washington did a study on material, and the result, the short story, the result of that study was that they found no increase in cancer rates on soccer players than the general public. They actually found that athletes that play on synthetic turf fields, or athletes that just play in general, have a lower cancer rate than the general population of Washington. So that came out about a year after, they commissioned that report because of the uproar. So that was
Okay.
all in Washington.
Any place you
And
go,
EPA.
new fields are synthetic now.
Yeah. So there's a trend back towards
It's costing.
going back to using chrome rubber.
Okay. Just want to,
Just over the last year or two.
people might bring it up.
Yeah.
They probably will.
So I don't want to belabor the point, I just want to get it straight in my own mind, because I think you mentioned that we're going to have to make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen
Yeah.
on this. So they're going to justifiably and understandably want to know about the cost,
Mhm.
okay? And that's what it's all going, probably half of the discussion is going to be around the cost, as it should be, right? So I just want to have it straight in my mind how this is going to phase in, even phase one.
Mhm.
Right, how's phase one gonna phase in? And what cost assumptions do we have to make as we make representations to the town of what it's gonna be? Because if there's a hiccup, and we all know there's gonna be a hiccup, because that's part of construction, we have to be able to quantify and justify the impact. I'm not saying we gotta get
I think we need to go with
it,
the prices we've got here,
right.
and with the idea we know that something's gonna change on it.
Right. So I think we should use the number 20 million regardless of,
Well,
Like the rough for the phase one.
For the,
Yeah. Especially if there's gonna be, if it's gonna
Thanks,
be
Rob.
Thank
for the
you.
phased
fields.
over a few
Thank you
years.
for the commission's time.
You got it.
I have another meeting I need to get to, so.
Okay.
But any further questions, I'm sure Mike, maybe we can get to. And if not tonight, then we're happy to come back at another time and continue the discussion, ultimately with the recommendation to the board, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Rob, for all
Thank
your
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I
Rob.
would like
Thanks,
to have
Rob.
that. We do not have to do this December 4th agenda since we're not getting, because now that we're not going to be on the,
We haven't been on this year's one, no.
yeah.
So-
When would we have a deadline for 2022?
Next one.
Right.
Next
Spring of
spring. we will-
2020?
Yes.
Between now and next
Oh,
spring, we
okay.
need to get on.
Yeah, between now, so December 4th was random. Not random, totally, but Rob and I were trying to get this back before people so we could start slotting things into the capital improvement plan.
Right.
But it's not so urgent now, we're not doing anything for 2021, because I think you guys need to get comfortable
Right.
with this plan.
Sure.
With what's in it, with what the phasing scheme might be, with what you may or may not even, I mean, you might want to put some stuff off for a while, you might want to change something or whatever. So, yeah, December 4th is.
so playground at Tom Nevers, except what he's putting in now, would stay like that until 2021.
Well, depending on what a new playground might cost, Maybe there's a grant. Maybe there's some other funding source we could attempt to chase down. We do, but I don't know if it can be used for, there's, Jack, you probably know better than I do what the rules are about the use for recreation.
There's park and recreation grants out there, there used to be anyway.
Yeah.
Where
Whether
is
there's
the
any more or not, I don't
the
know.
new Jetties playground and the new Tom Nevers?
They were donated.
Oh, okay.
They're talking about the, so talking about CBC, but
Yeah, I was just
It's
wondering where
all
that
like-
money came from, because they went in pretty recently.
Yeah,
Not only that, we could go before CPC
right.
for money.
for
That's what we,
2022.
that's what you, just that's what I'm trying to think of the regulations.
Right, because they have recreation money available each year.
Right. Somebody that's a
As long
big
as
grant
nobody else
too.
is putting in for it, you can
Yeah,
put
did
in
anybody
for
put
that.
anything in this year?
I thought it was for pickleball. Somebody put
Oh.
something
Yeah,
in for
pickleball
pickleball.
is,
What's CPC?
Community Preservation Committee, and the town has adopted the Community Preservation Act, which is a 3% surcharge on real estate bills, and that goes into a special fund, which is somewhat matched by the state, so I think we
you
bring
give out a
in.
couple $1 million every year.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then there's something of a match by the state, so organizations can apply for recreation, affordable housing, recreation and open space, affordable housing, and, preservation, historic preservation. And there's percentage maximums for each of those categories. And there are lots of restrictions on them. So for example, I'm gonna pick, like the Unitarian Church probably has gotten CPC funds to restore windows. And that entails that they have to put a preservation restriction on their property. Open space might have some
We
kind
have
of
to do
similar.
recreation money every year.
Well, that's our sweet spot.
It's really
Yeah.
good, plus
Yeah,
Park
a
and
lot
Rec
of
has
other communities
grants,
use
you
it
get
for,
that.
Right.
athletic facilities.
I have to go.
Yeah, I thought there
Depends
was,
on how
Are you
your
gonna do a vote,
charter
or
is.
do we need to do a vote?
well, I thought there
It
was.
sounds as though it's not
You
quite
can't
as
use it to-
urgent to do it tonight, but check with Libby.
Yeah.
You can now.
You can.
They changed the law a couple years ago
Oh, okay.
because
Okay.
there was some.
Libby, do we need to
appeals
make a vote tonight on this?
You don't.
Okay.
No, I mean, you, maybe what you want to do is schedule another meeting and have continued discussion on this. Maybe Mike can be available by phone, if not here. Because I just don't really know how you want to totally proceed with it.
Well, I'd leave it up to my fellow members how they feel about it.
Well, I think maybe we should discuss it more and just look at if there's anything we like and don't like. And
Okay, that's fine. Well, can we wait till the next meeting or?
Right.
What I would like to do is structurally plan our meeting and find out when we're meeting and
Yeah,
Set up a meeting schedule.
set up a meeting schedule,
Right.
because I think we're just, I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
well,
I like to
I
regulate.
think taking our time is important
And
because the
have
numbers here are
Blair
very big
Right.
and the impact is going to be significant.
Yeah.
So I don't know what time constraints you all have, Libby and the consulting
Well,
firm and the
In
town.
terms of a regular meeting schedule, I'm not sure what you were doing, but it does depend on room availability and room availability and your all's availability.
Yeah.
So, Jack, what, or Diane, do you?
We used to
Thursday
meet,
at 6,
yeah, we used to meet twice a month. But I think, right now, there's nothing really pressing.
Yeah.
If even if we went to at least once a month.
So maybe you want to try for was this a good time?
The last Thursday of the month is great for me.
Okay.
Thursday nights are very good for me.
All right,
Okay.
4? Does 4 work?
4 works
o'clock?
for me.
4 o'clock is fine, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just say the last Thursday?
We don't go.
Well, actually,
December,
last
we don't
Thursday, you're gonna be
do-
right in Christmas week,
Yeah,
we don't
so
do
maybe, I don't know, the second
Second Thursday.
Thursday of December?
That'd be the
Okay.
12th.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find your meeting space.
Okay, so hold on a second, let me take a quick look at the 12th. Okay, I don't need to be there, you all can talk about it amongst yourselves. And I don't know if Rob can be there or not, but the 12th is a FinCom, I think that is a FinCom public hearing on citizen warrant articles. which is probably downstairs in the community room. So I'm
What
just,
time is that at?
that I believe, that is at 4.
4 usually.
But, you know, you can go to that or not go to that, but I'm just saying, I probably will have to go to that. But you don't need me,
Do you
you guys
wanna go
can
to
sort
that,
through
though?
and jot any
No,
questions
it's fine, I'll
down.
be here.
And Rob might be able to come, or maybe Blair would be here next time too, because that would be important to get everybody.
I think it's
Yeah.
important. I really would like Blair here because of all his, he has a lot of information that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
there are a
does
lot of
sport
things that he
scheduling.
talked about at the last presentation, and I just feel that it's a piece of, I think he should be here.
So maybe one of the things you could do at your next meeting is kind of sort through the report, what do you like, what do you feel about, or whatever. And then think about if you have enough public input, think of any questions that you might have additionally for the consultant. So maybe he doesn't necessarily need to come to that meeting, but you could jot down whatever outstanding questions are, either for me or for him, or for Rob if he's not here. And then we can get those answered at a future meeting.
And on that note, can I ask one more question to the consultant? And I'm sure you've answered it over the course of the last hour and a half, and I apologize.
Yeah.
But over phase 1, over what period of time would that take typically to get an input?
Nobody here.
It depends on the contract. Oh, just Nobodier?
Yeah,
Well, it could take 4 or 5 months
okay,
for just that.
well, that's great.
But that's once you have the money for it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the second part of my question, is that, you know, the 4 or 5 of us are gonna have to answer that question and even come up with solutions to raise that money. So how would those tranches have to come in? Yeah, I don't expect the answer tonight, but the tranches of funding, How would they come in?
You have to have mass bidding laws, you have to have the funding in place
before you start.
before you can publicly get a project.
So it has to be right away.
It does, yeah.
Do you know if the information sessions were recorded, the public?
I can look for you, Emma.
Okay.
I think they were, because they were all down in the first one was here, I'm not sure if that one was recorded, but the others were in the community room, and I think they were recorded.
Okay.
Good question.
I know the select board
Okay,
meeting,
well,
that
not
would
that
have been
one,
recorded.
but anyway,
Yeah.
go back and look at that.
Yeah, just to know.
Sorry, guys, I'm gonna run to the.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
Thank you for delaying.
Thank you, Mike, I'm sorry
You're
too.
welcome.
And
Thanks.
maybe we can get your number, or you can
Yeah,
get his
I'll get it.
number in case we, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for nominating me.
Okay. All right, take care, thank you.
Okay, thanks, you need my number? That's all.
Oh, perfect, all right, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, thanks, Dan, good to meet you.
You as well.
So you want to go for the 12th,
12.
December 12th, Thursday, December 12th, 4 o'clock, so we can get this room.
Okay.
Schedule a couple of hours. Now, in terms of agenda and notifying people and stuff like that, I'm thinking that maybe through Maureen, we could do that. Did we do an outlook for this meeting?
No.
So maybe what we can do is put out an Outlook invite to you all, to the commission, for that meeting, so you get it into your calendars and stuff, and send you an email as well.
Yes,
And develop an agenda that we could send to you, Tom,
Yeah.
to look over. We could adjust it however you like, and then we can send that as an attachment with the Outlook, so you all have with the agendas, and you know, we'll have copies here, because anybody can. And as a side note, I made a note to make sure that this plan, as well as the PowerPoint that was given in March, as well as the contract with Weston and Sampson, so that, which has the scope of work in it for what they're doing for us, is posted on the Park and Rec webpage.
Okay, good.
Because I noticed that it's not right now, so we'll get that up. Anything else?
one other thing, I might make a suggestion to the consulting firm, to the extent that you can, okay, you may not be able to do this, and I don't want to back you into a corner, is come up with a simple Gantt chart, project plan, one pager.
Okay.
It'd be very helpful to me, and I'm sure it'd be helpful to other people, but if you can come up with a one pager just showing how the whole thing will unfold,
Mhm.
and then maybe we can drop some numbers in on the bottom with the caveat that they're estimates.
Mhm.
And that
Okay.
way, you know, we can have the commission, and then whomever else wants to see it would have a good point of reference to see how this thing's gonna
Yeah, see how it will
come out.
progress. Yeah,
And
Okay.
it can be very, very top level.
yeah. Okay. So,
Okay,
Okay,
any
yeah.
last thoughts?
No, I think in the interest of time, the other sites are in the master plan, so
Okay.
you can look at those. And they're for future thought anyway, so, I just, in the interest of time, maybe not go over those.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
thank you.
welcome.
Really helpful.
And thanks for the time.
And again, it's a good
Glad
job.
to
It's a-
present to you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Do you need to write anything?
No, I have the truck.
Oh, the truck, of
Drew's
course.
off by, Drew left the island as I got on, and
Oh.
he gave me the truck.
Oh, perfect.
So I was like, I was just gonna go look at renting a car or something.
Oh,
He's
that's
like, oh, take the truck.
Okay,
And,
perfect.
and I got the house too, so.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, I didn't have to get a room or
Oh, that's
get a
awesome.
vehicle. So
I
it
forgot to
worked out.
mention, I probably should have
Yeah.
mentioned this earlier to you all. When we're meeting in here, and it's being taped, you have to speak into the, grab the mic and just speak into it. It's not for amplifying, it's for the video.
Right,
And I forgot to
Yeah.
make sure of that.
Okay,
Somebody will probably mention it
right.
somewhere along.
if they're watching this,
Well, there's one pretty close to you.
yeah. So,
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Yeah. Okay. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Accepted.